Today for our daily cancellation, we turn to the story of MMA fighter and woman beater Alana McLaughlin. Now, the most important thing to know about McLaughlin is that he is a male. He's also former Army Special Forces, but mostly he's a male. And when I say he's a male, I mean he has XY chromosomes and a male reproductive system and male gametes. So it makes a person a male. He also has a male bone structure, muscle structure. He's male from head to toe, from skin to bone, from his brain down to his cells, down to his DNA. Literally every part of him is male. If they dig up his remains 100 years from now, no matter how much of him is left, they will be able to tell that he was male. That will indeed be one of the only things they will be able to tell about him. That's because your maleness or your femaleness is one of the most ingrained, most permanent, most enduring aspects of who you are. It's so enduring that it remains even after you die. McLaughlin will be a male even when he doesn't exist anymore. That's how male he is. Think about that. If you're a man, even when you stop existing, you'll still be a man. And yet, that didn't stop him from fighting a woman in the MMA ring. During the Combat Global prelims on Friday night, McLaughlin fought and easily defeated Celine Provost, another MMA fighter. To be more specific, after beating her across the head and the body for a couple of rounds, he eventually got her into a submission hold and choked her out. This was, again, a man beating the crap out of a woman. An event that, in the past, would have been roundly condemned by everybody. When former Ravens running back Ray Rice punched his wife in an elevator, it was one of the biggest sports scandals in NFL history. And Rice was run out of the league, never to return. Now we know that Rice could have simply come out the day that the security camera footage was leaked. Could have come out and said that he's a woman. Asked everyone to call him Regina Rice from now on. It's bad for Ray to beat a woman, but Regina, now, that's a different story. That's why Alana McLaughlin is being celebrated as a hero today after choking a woman into submission. But McLaughlin is not the one I'm canceling today. Yeah, he's a cheater, a woman beater, a bad person for that reason. He's also a pathological narcissist. Yes, he's a male who beat a woman to a pulp and who identified Fallon Fox as his hero. Fallon Fox is the other trans MMA fighter who retired a few years ago, who twice fractured a woman's skull and then bragged about it. So yes, all of that is true and all of that is worthy of cancellation, to be sure. But as always, the bad guys disgust me somewhat less than the cowards who knowingly go along with the evil because they're too scared and too selfish to speak out. And the announcers and commentators during this farcical fight on Friday night give us a pretty good idea of what that cowardice sounds like. So let's go through some of these clips. First, here is one of the hosts before the fight introducing Alana McLaughlin and very, very gingerly acknowledging that maybe some people in the viewing audience might have a problem with watching a man kick and punch a woman for 10 minutes. Listen.
Back here on Combate Global with Rodolfo Roman, my name is Max Bretos, and Alana McLaughlin will be fighting here tonight, and the topic of trans athletes competing obviously splinters the conversation quite frequently. However, whatever side you think about and whether you think that the trans athlete should compete, one thing we can all agree on, the sacrifices one has to make that decision is bigger than anything any of us would do on a regular basis. Alana McLaughlin has had to overcome many hurdles in her life and her career. It's a journey that only her have taken. Let's take a closer look at some of those sacrifices that she has had to make.
As early as I knew there was a difference between girls and boys, I knew that something was different. I grew up mostly in South Carolina. My upbringing was not exactly standard. It wasn't usual. My parents go to church 5 times a week. Wasn't the best childhood. We didn't have a lot of money. And of course, growing up a queer kid in the South, it was never going to be easy. My family definitely was not supportive and are not today.
His family is not supportive. Well, that's good news at least. You like how he says, my upbringing was pretty rough, not usual. My family went to church. And that's all he has. That's his horror story of being raised. Man, I had it pretty tough. Family went to church. Yep, that was it. Now, I can tell you that I certainly would not be supportive of my son getting into the ring with women and choking them on national television. That's not something that I would support, to put it mildly. And yet the announcer says that we can all agree that the sacrifices made by a male who beats up a woman are bigger than any of the sacrifices that any of us have ever made. We can all agree, he says. And what he means, of course, is that we must all agree. We are required to agree. Just as his employers have told him that he must agree. That's why his facial expression and his stuttering, stammering delivery remind you of a hostage tape. This guy knows how hopelessly screwed up all of this is, but he's cooperating with the charade. And that brings us to the fight itself, speaking of the charade. Fast forwarding a little bit to where the foregone conclusion is realized and the man beats the woman, let's listen to the announcers as they very carefully wrestle with the implications of the spectacle that they themselves are now a part of.
Big right hand. I, for one, and just full transparency, I don't know what to expect. I don't know how to feel about this. But I pull for Alana McLaughlin because you've seen what you've gone through. To go through what she has done, it's a seismic change in your life, but it's the pursuit of happiness.
Absolutely. But, at the end of the day, Max, it really does come down to technique and skills. You could be as strong as you want, but skill, technique will always conquer.
Well, I agree with you there, Rodolfo, but that's an argument people will bring up, and they'll beg to differ. Now the strength
trying to go
up, does pretty well, gets her on the ground. Now you can see how her ground game goes. This is for Celine Provost, the uncharted waters.
Yeah, not your typical wrestling double takedown. As you can see, she had to hold her up there for a while. Usually your wrestler goes straight down for the knee area or even to the ankles, to be honest, just to bring them all the way down. She had to lift her up like a deadlift, and then she brought her down.
McLaughlin's got the back of Provost, and now
we might have her rear naked.
Deep. And the tap. Alana McLaughlin victorious in her MMA debut via the rear naked choke. Had to take a lot of pressure to get there, but she did.
Yep, beat the woman in the ribs, had her bleed in the face, choked her out. You hear them say, if you can't beat them, join them. Well, if you want to beat them, join them. In Alana McLaughlin's case. Now, but the announcer says, I don't know how to feel about this, but certainly Alana feels good. And that's the most important thing. I don't know how I feel, or how anybody feels, or how the woman getting pummeled into submission right now feels, but all that matters is how the trans person feels. If it makes him feel good to beat a woman, who are we to judge? The pursuit of happiness, he says. This is the pursuit of happiness, as this man is in the process of punching a woman in the ribs. We all pursue happiness in our own ways. Now, I'm just paraphrasing the announcers here a little bit. And then finally, here they are at the conclusion of the fight, sharing their closing thoughts about everything that we've all just watched.
That was a game plan, and it worked to her advantage. Kudos to Celine. She took the fight, and kudos to Alana. Right now, I'm sure a lot of teenagers, adults are emotional.
Yes, victory for the trans community, and the conversations will go from here as to what's next for Alana McLaughlin. Whether this should be part of the sport. Right now, that doesn't matter. Alana McLaughlin has gone through hell and high water to get here. This was a fight that was supposed to happen August the 6th, put on hold. Finally here in the second week of September, it happens.
Yes, a lot of teenagers and adults are emotional. What does that mean, by the way? A lot of teenagers and adults are emotional watching this. What? But they're having conversations. And the trans community is having conversations. And there are some who might say maybe that this shouldn't be a part of the sport, that this sport should not be a staging ground for men to beat the hell out of women. Some might say that, but that doesn't matter now because, again, the trans person feels good. He's feeling very good about all of this, and that's what matters. That's the only thing that matters in the whole world. The world itself indeed exists simply to make trans people feel good about themselves. All of us, on our deathbeds, when surrounded by our loved ones, will surely ask ourselves one question: did I, during my life, make trans people feel good about themselves? And woe to those who cannot say yes on that day. What regret, what terrible regret. Again, I'm slightly paraphrasing what we just said. Now you have to ask yourself, do any of these men hosting this fight and commenting on it actually think that any of this is okay or logical or morally justifiable? No, they don't. Yeah, I can read their minds and tell you they don't. We can say with certainty they don't. Yet they cooperate with this grotesque absurdity. And that's the story of our culture, isn't it? That's the story. The story is not Alana McLaughlin. The Alana McLaughlins of the world are not the ones driving the radical social change that we're witnessing. They're not the ones driving our society over the cliff, which is the radical change we're witnessing. The change is much the same as the change that a car undergoes when it goes over a cliff and crashes on the rocks below. Civilization will not collapse because of them, because of the Alana McLaughlins. Instead, the real revolutionaries, unintentionally, are all of the millions of normal, basically sane people who know that what they're seeing is wrong, who know that it is not okay, and they know why it is not okay, and yet they remain quiet. And then ultimately, they're forced to participate in the evil that they oppose, but oppose silently in their hearts, where the opposition doesn't matter and accomplishes nothing. You want to almost feel sorry for those announcers who clearly want no part of this, but are forced to take part in it anyway. But then you realize that they're not forced. None of us are really forced. It's just that refusing to take part may require sacrifice. And many of us are not willing to make the sacrifice, no matter how great or small. All we have are excuses. We make our excuses while our civilization rots away beneath our feet. I'm personally tired of the excuses. I'm tired of gutless cowards like the announcers in that MMA match who could have refused to be a part of it. Or you know what's even better? They could have said, sure, yeah, I'll announce this match. And then they could have spent the entire time talking about what an absolute travesty the entire thing was. That would have taken guts. They would have lost their jobs. They would have had lots of people coming after them. But we're at a point now where you have to do the thing that requires courage. And if you won't do it, then you're no better than anyone on the other side. And that's why today, ultimately, the announcers in that match, and all like them, are canceled. Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.